When my son brought his fiancée home for the first time, she looked at my hands and said, "God, what happened to you? You look like you lost a fight with a paper shredder." She laughed at her own joke. My son laughed too. But 3 months later, when her mother saw me standing in my doorway, she collapsed on my porch and whispered through tears, "You're the one. You're the man from the water." I had spent all morning getting ready, scrubbed the kitchen tile until it shone, set the oak dining table my late wife Ruth and I had refinished together back in '94, the year we bought this place. Cloth napkins, the good silverware, a pot roast slow cooking since dawn. 64 years old, and I still believed first impressions mattered. Still believed you could win someone over with a well-cooked meal and a clean house. The house sat on a hill overlooking the harbor in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Nothing fancy. A Cape Cod with cedar shingles weathered silver by salt air. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a view of the Atlantic that Ruth used to say was worth more than anything we owned. She was right. I'd lived here for 30 years, maintained every inch of it myself, replaced the roof twice, rebuilt the porch after the nor'easter of 2011. This was my life's work, second only to 28 years in the Coast Guard, pulling people out of the ocean. Nathan arrived at 6 with a woman named Victoria Ashford. She was tall, dark-haired, dressed in something sleek and expensive. Her eyes moved across my entryway the way a real estate agent's do, measuring, pricing, categorizing. Nathan stood behind her wearing an expression I hadn't seen before, eager and nervous and slightly apologetic, like a dog that knows it dragged something dead onto the carpet. That's when she saw my hands. The scars ran from my knuckles to my wrists, thick and pale against my weathered skin. Burns from a fuel fire during a helicopter rescue in '03. More scars on my forearms, my left shoulder. 28 years of pulling, drowning people from freezing water had left its marks. God, what happened to you? You look like you lost a fight with a paper shredder. She said it, smiling, like it was charming. Nathan let out a short, uncomfortable laugh and looked at the floor. I held the door open wider. "Come in. Dinner's ready." Victoria walked past me and immediately began examining everything. She ran her finger along the wainscoting in the hallway, glanced up at the ceiling medallion in the living room, paused at the bay window overlooking the harbor. "Nice view," she said, in a tone that really meant nice asset. At the table, I served the pot roast. Victoria moved her plate slightly, studied the food like she suspected it might be beneath her. She took one bite, chewed slowly, set her fork down. "So, Harold, Nathan says you're retired. What did you do before?" "I worked for the Coast Guard." "Oh." She nodded the way people nod when they've already lost interest. "Like a boat mechanic or something?" "Search and rescue," I said. "Helicopter rescue swimmer." She didn't ask a follow-up question. Instead, she looked around the dining room. "This house must be worth quite a bit. Waterfront in Gloucester? I bet developers would kill for this lot." "I'm not selling." "Of course not." She smiled. "Not yet, anyway." Nathan shifted in his seat. The conversation drifted to their plans. They'd been dating 5 months. Victoria worked in marketing for a luxury real estate firm in Boston. She talked about her career with the kind of confidence that comes from believing everyone else's life is less interesting than yours. By dessert, she'd mentioned the property value twice more, commented that my furniture was vintage but dated, and suggested I might want to think about downsizing before the market shifts. Each comment was wrapped in a smile, delivered casually, as if she were doing me a favor. I cleared the plates in silence. When I came back from the kitchen, I stood at the head of my table and looked at them both. "Thank you for coming. I think we'll call it a night." Nathan's head snapped up. "Dad, we just got here, and now you're leaving." Victoria's eyes narrowed for half a second before her face smoothed back into pleasantness. She picked up her purse with exaggerated calm. "Well, I suppose we know where we stand." I walked them to the door. Nathan hesitated on the porch, mouth open like he wanted to say something. "Good night, Nathan," I said, and closed the door. I stood in the hallway listening to their car pull away. Then I went back to the dining room and looked at Victoria's plate. She'd eaten 3 bites and arranged the rest to look untouched. I scraped it into the trash, washed every dish by hand, dried them, put them away. My hands were steady. They'd been steady through Force 9 gales and capsized vessels and bodies floating face down in black water. A rude woman at my dinner table wasn't going to shake them. But something had shifted. Not anger exactly. Recognition. I'd spent my career reading the ocean, learning to spot the signs of a storm before it arrived. Victoria Ashford was a storm, and she was just getting started. Nathan called the next morning. His voice was tight, accusatory. You embarrassed us last night. Victoria was trying to be friendly, and you shut her down. You owe her an apology. I don't owe anyone an apology for defending my dignity in my own home. She was making conversation, Dad. You're too sensitive. She was appraising my house, Nathan. There's a difference. He hung up. I set the phone down, walked to my porch, sat in the chair Ruth and I used to share our morning coffee in, and watched a lobster boat work the harbor. The silence where my son's voice had been felt heavier than I expected. 2 weeks passed. Nathan didn't call. I didn't call him either. I kept my routine. Morning walk along the seawall. Coffee at the harbor cafe. Tuesday errands. Thursday chess with my neighbor Frank. But at night, I sat at my desk and did something I'd never thought I'd need to do. I researched Massachusetts property law, estate protection, inheritance statutes, printed articles, highlighted passages, took notes in my careful handwriting. On the 15th day, Nathan called again. Different tone this time. Excited. Breathless. Dad, great news. Victoria and I are engaged. Weddings in September. That's fast. When you know, you know. He paused. And we've been talking about living arrangements. Your house has all that space, 4 bedrooms for one person. We could move in after the wedding, help with upkeep, keep you company. There it was, wrapped in concern, disguised as generosity. The real play. No. I said, what? You and Victoria will not be moving into my house. This is not a discussion. You're being selfish. Victoria's already looking at renovation ideas to modernize the upstairs. She's planning renovations on a house she doesn't own and has been in exactly once. Silence. Then quieter, almost rehearsed. She wants to be part of this family, Dad. She's thinking long-term. For all of us. She's thinking long-term about my property. There's a difference, and you're choosing not to see it. I hung up, went to my filing cabinet, and pulled out every important document I owned. Deed, will, bank statements, pension records, Ruth's life insurance policy. Spread them across my desk like a battle map. Everything I'd earned in 28 years of pulling people out of the North Atlantic, everything Ruth and I had built together. They thought they could take it because I was old and alone and too tired to fight. They were wrong. I called an attorney the next day. Margaret Liu, estate law, recommended by Frank's daughter who worked at the county courthouse. Her office overlooked the harbor, 3 blocks from my house. I brought everything. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the situation. Nathan's engagement, Victoria's behavior, the comments about property value, the renovation plans for rooms she had no claim to. Margaret examined each document, made notes, asked precise questions. What you're describing is a pattern of financial positioning, she said finally. She's laying groundwork to claim access to your estate through your son. Can she succeed? Not if we build the right protections now. Your mental competence is clearly sound. Your decisions are autonomous. We'll create structures that are essentially impenetrable. Over the next hour, she outlined the strategy. Irrevocable trust, with the Gloucester Maritime Heritage Foundation as beneficiary. Updated transfer on death deed. Competency affidavit, witnessed by my physician. Letters of intent to Nathan formally documenting my wishes. I signed everything that week. Each signature felt like dropping an anchor in bedrock. A month of silence followed. Then Nathan showed up at my door on a Wednesday afternoon. Alone, hands in his pockets, looking like he used to look at 12 when he'd broken something and was working up the courage to confess. Can we talk? I let him in. Didn't offer coffee. We sat in the living room, him on the couch, me in my chair. The wedding venues in Boston are expensive, he started. Victoria wants something elegant, classic. Her parents would help, but they've got their own situation. I need $20,000, Dad. No, he blinked. Just like that? I live on a pension. That money doesn't exist for you. You're sitting on a waterfront property worth $800,000. You could take a home equity line if you wanted. You just don't want to help us. I don't want to finance a wedding for a woman who walked into my home, insulted my appearance, and has been planning how to take my house ever since. His face reddened. That's not fair. Victoria's changed. She feels terrible about that first dinner. Then she can tell me herself. He left angry. I watched his car disappear down the hill toward the harbor road and felt something settle in my chest. Not sadness. Certainty. I'd drawn my line. Whatever came next would come from their side. What came next was a charm offensive. 3 weeks after Nathan's visit, they both showed up on a Saturday morning. Victoria wore jeans and a simple sweater, hair down, minimal makeup, a calculated downgrade from her usual polish. "Harold, I owe you an apology," she said on my porch. I was nervous and overcompensated with bad humor. "That's not who I am. Can we start over?" Her delivery was flawless, humble but not groveling, sincere but not desperate. If I hadn't already seen her real face, I might have believed it. I let them in. They stayed 2 hours. Victoria asked about my career, about Ruth, about the house's history. She complimented the kitchen tiles, the harbor view, the garden Ruth had planted. Every question perfectly calibrated to show interest, without pushing boundaries. They came back the following week with groceries. Expensive groceries, artisanal bread, imported cheese, organic produce. Victoria moved through my kitchen like she was memorizing the layout, opening drawers, noting where things were kept. "Your kitchen has incredible bones," she said. "They don't build them like this anymore." The visits continued. Weekly, then twice weekly. Victoria brought small gifts, asked thoughtful questions, offered to help with yard work. Nathan beamed through every visit, convinced his father and his fiancée were finally connecting. But I was watching, and the cracks showed. During one visit, Victoria stood at my bedroom doorway while Nathan was in the bathroom. She didn't know I'd come up the stairs behind her. She was photographing the room with her phone. Not one photo, a series. The closet, the window dimensions, the ceiling height, the floor. She was taking measurements with her eyes and documenting them. I stepped back silently and waited downstairs. 2 weeks later, I found a manila folder in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a property assessment from Harborview Realty, commissioned by Victoria Ashford. My property, valued at $815,000. The request date was during her charm offensive. The same week she'd brought me flowers and told me she admired my resilience. She'd been pricing my house while pretending to care about my life. I called Harborview. The agent confirmed Victoria had contacted them, claiming to represent the family for estate planning purposes. I informed them no such authorization existed. They apologized and sent me copies of all correspondence. That afternoon, I drove to Margaret Liu's office and added the assessment documents to my file. Margaret reviewed them, shook her head. "She's building a case for herself," Margaret said, "documenting the property value, establishing presence in the home through regular visits, creating a narrative that she's part of the household. If she marries your son and moves in, she'll have a much stronger position to claim equitable interest over time. She's not moving in. Good. But we should add another layer of protection." We did. More documents, more signatures, more locks on doors Victoria was trying to open. When I drove home, the folder sat on my passenger seat, like evidence in a trial. Because that's what it was. The last private conversation happened on a warm evening in July. Nathan had stepped outside to take a work call. Victoria and I were alone in the kitchen. The second Nathan's footsteps faded, her face changed. The warmth vanished. The smile turned predatory. "You think you're clever, don't you, old man?" Her voice was low, almost a hiss. "Changing your will, hiring lawyers, building your little fortress. Nathan does what I tell him. He always has. After the wedding, this house, your savings, your precious pension, It's all just a matter of time. You think a piece of paper stops me? I looked at her steadily. Said nothing. She leaned closer. You're 64 years old. Living alone. No friends that matter. A son who chose me over you. How long do you really think you can hold out? The back door opened. Nathan walked in, oblivious. Everything okay? He asked. Victoria's face transformed instantly. Warmth, sweetness, light. Just telling your father how much this time together means to me, she said, touching Nathan's arm. After they left, I sat at my desk and wrote down every word she'd said. Dated it, signed it, filed it. Evidence. Another document in a growing archive of who Victoria Ashford really was. 2 months before the wedding, Nathan called with a request that surprised me. Victoria's parents want to meet you. Thomas and Linda. They're driving up from Connecticut this weekend. Victoria thinks a family dinner at your place would mean a lot. Show them. You're welcoming them into the family. I considered it. The risk of another disaster against the slim chance of reaching Nathan one last time. Saturday evening, I said. 6 o'clock. I'll cook. I spent the week preparing. Not just the food, roasted chicken, seasoned potatoes, fresh bread, but myself. I reviewed my documents, confirmed my legal protections, organized my thoughts. Whatever happened at this dinner, I would be ready. Saturday arrived gray and cool, the kind of New England summer evening where fog rolls in from the harbor and softens every edge. I set 5 places at the table. Checked twice. 5 chairs, 5 plates, 5 sets of silverware. Everything precise. Nathan and Victoria arrived first, 20 minutes early. She wore a cream-colored dress and her best performance smile. Nathan carried a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. The house looks wonderful, Harold, Victoria said, touching my arm as she passed. You've really outdone yourself. I let them help in the kitchen. Victoria found the bread knife without asking where it was. 3rd drawer on the left, she said. I remember from last time. She wanted me to know she'd cataloged my home. Her eyes met mine with quiet triumph. Nathan's phone rang. Work emergency, he said, grimacing. 2 minutes. He stepped onto the back porch and closed the door. The kitchen shrank. Victoria's mask dropped. Last chance to make this easy, old man, she whispered. After September, I'll be family. Legal family. And families share everything, whether you like it or not. I kept my hands flat on the counter. Looked at her without expression. She smiled, cold and certain. You can't win this. I've been planning since before Nathan proposed. Every visit, every smile, every casserole, all building toward the same thing. You're fighting someone who already knows how this ends. The doorbell rang. Victoria's face flickered. She straightened, smoothed her dress, rearranged her expression in the space of a heartbeat. When Nathan came back inside, she was smiling again, warm and eager to greet her parents. I walked to the front door. Something felt heavy in the moment, the way air feels before a storm breaks. 30 years of rescue work had taught me to trust that instinct, the feeling that something massive was about to shift. I opened the door. A couple stood on my porch. Early 60s. The man wore a pressed Oxford shirt, the woman a navy dress. They smiled politely, the smiles of people meeting a stranger they've heard about. You must be Harold, the man started. I'm Thomas. This is my wife Linda. We've heard so much about. He stopped. His smile froze, then fell away. His eyes locked onto my face with sudden, fierce intensity. Then they dropped to my hands, the scars across my knuckles and wrists. Linda, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Look at his hands. Look at his face. Linda looked. Her expression shifted from politeness to confusion to something raw and overwhelming. She pressed both hands to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh my God, she breathed. It's you. I don't think we've met, I said. Thomas grabbed my arm. His grip was trembling. 22 years ago. The Cape Ann ferry disaster. You pulled our daughter out of the water. The world tilted. Our daughter, Thomas continued, his voice breaking. She was 8 years old. The ferry capsized in the storm. Everyone was in the water. The Coast Guard came, and most of the rescuers focused on the adults. But Victoria, she was so small. She got separated from us, pulled under by the current. The memory surfaced like something rising from deep water. October 2003. The Cape Ann ferry Mariner, carrying 47 passengers from Rockport to Gloucester. A rogue wave in an unexpected squall. The ferry rolled. Everyone went into 50-degree water. I was on the helicopter that day. Rescue swimmer. We reached the scene in 11 minutes. Bodies everywhere in the chop. Some moving, some not. The other swimmers went for the clusters. I spotted something small. A flash of yellow jacket being dragged by the current 200 yards from the main group. A child. You jumped from the helicopter, Linda said through her tears. Thomas and I were on a rescue raft. We were screaming that our daughter was still in the water. Nobody could reach her. And then you jumped. Cunning one. I remembered. The water was brutal. Current pulling hard. Visibility 0 in the swells. I swam for nearly 4 minutes before I reached her. She was unconscious, hypothermic, barely breathing. I got her in the harness, signaled the helicopter, held her against my chest as we lifted. Her lips were blue. Her body was so cold it burned against my skin. The fuel line on the helicopter's hoist caught fire during the lift, Thomas said. We watched from the raft. Flames on the cable, and you were hanging there holding our daughter, 30 feet above the water. You wrapped yourself around her, shielded her with your body. I looked down at my hands. The scars. The burn scars Victoria had mocked at our first dinner. They were from that fire. From wrapping my arms around an 8-year-old girl while burning aviation fuel dripped onto my skin. The cable held. We made it into the helicopter. The medic took her from my arms, and I passed out from the pain. Victoria, I said slowly. Your daughter Victoria is our Victoria. Linda was sobbing openly now. We moved to Hartford after the accident. Victoria spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Hypothermia, water in her lungs, trauma. She had nightmares for years. We tried to find you, but everything was chaos, and the Coast Guard wouldn't release crew names at the time. We never knew who saved her. Movement behind me. Victoria appeared in the hallway, drawn by the voices. She was still wearing her performance face. Mom? Dad? What's going on? Then she heard Linda's words through the tears. The Coast Guard swimmer who saved you. From the ferry. It's him. It's Harold. Victoria stopped walking. The blood left her face. Her eyes went to my hands. The scars she had mocked. The scars I got shielding her body from burning fuel while we dangled above the Atlantic. No, she whispered. No, that's not. I watched recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the hallway wall and slid down it until she was sitting on my floor, hands over her face. A sound coming from her throat that was barely human. What have I done? Nathan appeared from the kitchen, bewildered. What's happening? Dad? Victoria? Thomas still gripped my arm, tears streaming down his face. You saved our little girl. You burned your hands saving her. And she didn't know. She called my scars a paper shredder joke, I said quietly. The words weren't angry. They were just true. Linda made a sound like something breaking. Victoria was rocking on the floor, sobbing into her hands. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was him. I didn't remember his face. I only remembered the cold and someone holding me and then the hospital. I didn't know. Nathan looked from Victoria to me to Thomas and back, his face cycling through confusion, shock, and the beginning of understanding. Dad, he said slowly, you never told me you were a rescue swimmer. You said you worked for the Coast Guard. You never said, I did my job, Nathan. For 28 years, I did my job. I didn't keep count of the people I pulled out. I went home. I took care of your mother. I raised you. That's what mattered. But you saved Victoria's life. You almost died doing it. I saved a lot of people's lives. Some of them I couldn't save. I don't talk about it because talking about it doesn't change anything. Thomas was shaking. 22 years we've carried this gratitude with nowhere to put it. Every birthday Victoria celebrated. Every milestone. We thought about the man who made it possible, and now we find you like this." Victoria lifted her head. Her face was destroyed, makeup gone, eyes swollen, expression stripped of every mask she'd ever worn. For the first time since I'd known her, I was looking at a real person. "Tell me why," I said. She couldn't speak for a long moment. Then, in a broken voice, "I almost died in that water. I was 8 years old, and I felt myself drowning, and I thought that was it. And after, the nightmares, the panic attacks, the feeling that at any moment everything could be taken away again. I spent my whole life trying to control everything around me. If I controlled the money, the house, the people, then nothing could take anything from me again. I became someone who takes before she can be taken from." She looked at my hands, and I made fun of the scars you got saving me. I looked at the hands that pulled me out of the ocean, and I made a joke about them. The room was silent except for Linda's quiet crying. I pulled a chair from the dining room and sat down in the hallway with all of them. Nathan leaning against the wall, looking stunned. Thomas and Linda clutching each other. Victoria on the floor, broken open. "I spent 28 years in the Coast Guard," I said. "I learned something in that time. The ocean doesn't care how strong you think you are. It doesn't care about your plans or your control. The only thing that saves anyone is someone else reaching out a hand. I reached out mine for you 22 years ago, because that's what you do. You save people, but you've spent the years since then becoming someone who hurts people, and that's a choice, Victoria. Trauma explains it. It doesn't excuse it." She nodded, tears still falling. "I've changed my will," I continued. "This house goes to the Gloucester Maritime Heritage Foundation when I die. That decision stands. My property is not and will never be a bargaining chip in this family. If you want to be part of my family, you'll need to earn that with how you treat people, not with what you can take from them." Victoria looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not performance, not calculation. Shame. Real, devastating shame. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll prove it. I don't know how yet, but I will." "Then start," I said. "Not with grand gestures, with small ones. Every day." The dinner I'd prepared went cold that night. We sat in my living room instead, talking for hours. Thomas told me about the years after the ferry accident, Victoria's recovery, the nightmares that lasted through her teens. Victoria spoke haltingly about her therapy, the coping mechanisms that had curdled into cruelty. Nathan sat quietly, absorbing, beginning to understand things about his fiancée and his father that he'd never known. When they left, Thomas embraced me in my doorway with a grip that said everything words couldn't. Linda kissed my scarred hands and couldn't speak. Victoria stopped last. She stood on my porch in the fog, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me then, and for not giving up on me now." I nodded. That was enough. No false warmth, no premature reconciliation, just acknowledgement. After their taillights disappeared down the hill, I stood on my porch and listened to the foghorn out on the breakwater. The same sound I'd heard 10,000 nights in this house. Ruth's garden was dark shapes in the mist. The harbor lights reflected on the water below. The wedding in September was small, 30 guests in a garden behind a restaurant in Gloucester. No extravagance, no luxury venue. Victoria had insisted on modest, Nathan told me. She said she wanted it to be about the marriage, not the show. I sat in the third row and watched my son marry a woman who was still learning to be the person she should have been all along. Thomas caught my eye during the vows and nodded, a gesture that carried 22 years of gratitude. A week later, Nathan called. We signed a lease on a 2-bedroom in Salem. Victoria found it. She said we need to build our own life, in our own space, not in yours. Good, I said. That's the right choice. The letter came in October. 3 pages, handwritten. Dear Harold, I cannot undo calling your scars a joke. I cannot undo the months of manipulation, the property assessments behind your back, the plans I made for rooms that were never mine. I can only tell you that I am ashamed of who I was and committed to becoming someone worthy of what you gave me. You saved my life twice, once from the water and once from myself. when you refuse to let me keep being cruel without consequence. I am in therapy. I am learning why I became who I became and how to stop. It will take time. I know that, but I will not stop trying. I read it twice at my desk, looking out at the harbor. Then I wrote back. 4 lines. I see your effort. Continue the work. Trust is built slowly and proven through consistency. I'm willing to watch and wait. November brought early cold and the kind of quiet that settles over coastal towns when the tourists leave. I sat on my porch in my heavy coat, coffee steaming, watching the harbor. Frank came over for chess on Thursday. Nathan called on Sundays. Casual, no agenda, just a son talking to his father. The legal documents stayed in my filing cabinet, necessary when I'd created them, now resting quietly. Not weapons I needed to use, but walls that still stood, protecting what I'd built. The house was mine. The view was mine. The life Ruth and I had made here. The memories in every room. The garden she'd planted. The porch where we'd watched 1,000 sunsets. All of it remained exactly as it should be. I'd prepared for war, built my defenses, armed myself with documents and boundaries, and the calm discipline of a man who'd spent his career staying steady in chaos. But the war ended not because I won it by force, but because truth arrived uninvited and changed everything. Victoria Ashford had walked into my life planning to take everything I had. She'd insulted me, manipulated my son, schemed and calculated and positioned herself to claim my home, my savings, my life's work. And she turned out to be the 8-year-old girl I'd burned my hands saving from the North Atlantic 22 years ago. I didn't destroy her. I didn't need to. The truth did what no strategy could. It broke through her armor, forced her to see herself clearly, and gave her the chance to rebuild. Whether she would fully succeed, I didn't know. Time would tell. But she was trying, and that was more than I dared to hope for. The foghorn sounded across the water. I finished my coffee, stood up, stretched, and went inside. Tomorrow I'd walk the seawall. Thursday I'd play chess with Frank. Saturday, Nathan and Victoria were coming for dinner. Just dinner. No agenda, no performance, no hidden plans. Just family. Trying. My house stood solid on its hill. Cedar shingles silver in the November light. Ruth's garden sleeping under mulch. The harbor spreading out below like it had for 300 years. Everything I'd built, everything I'd protected, everything I'd earned in 28 years of reaching into dark water and pulling people back to life, it was all still here, still mine, still standing, still home. I closed the door, turned the lock, and smiled. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.